Hi everyone, welcome to online instruction. I thought it would be a good idea to start off by reviewing chapter 10 since we were cut off early from finishing chapter 10 with our vocabulary quiz and our test. So we will not have a vocabulary quiz and we will not have an assessment on this chapter, but we will take a couple of days just to review the content of chapter 10. And when we get back to school and we're reviewing for the AP exam, we will spend some more time going back over the content of this chapter. So don't forget that you need to write a few things down and then take a picture of your notes, or if you're taking notes on your phone, you can do that and then email me either a picture or your notes that you've taken on your phone. So let's get started. So the first thing that I just wanted to review with us is the difference between developed and developing countries. We talked about a common acronym is MDCs and LDCs, and MDC is a more developed country, and typically they are more productive because they have more access to technology. So this would be like the United States, this would be Canada, this would be European countries. And then developing countries usually have technology, but it's owned by just a few, and they are not as productive, they are not as developed, simply because they lack access to technology. And so this would be like Southeast Asia, many African nations, Southwest Asia, the Middle East. These are LDCs, or less developed countries. Along with this is just the concept of development, and this just means that a country is making improvements. And for the purposes of this chapter, the way that they are making improvements is that there is a diffusion or a spread of knowledge and technology that allows them to be more productive than other countries. So we talked about the gross national income and purchasing power parity, and how those two things are sometimes used together and sometimes used separately. The gross national income is just the value of the output of goods and services that are produced in a country in a year. And so this includes money that leaves a country. Basically, this is the how many goods and services we are producing as a country in a given year. That's a lot of money. But it's one way to measure the development of a country, is how much they are selling. Purchasing power parity, sometimes in order to determine development, they will use purchasing power parity and compare that with the GNI to determine differences between countries and the cost of goods. So I think the example we gave in class was like if London and Paris, or let's say England and France, have the same GNI, but it costs a lot more money to buy food in England than it does in France, then France would be more developed. They would have a higher GNI based on that category because it's cheaper to buy food there. So purchasing power parity is just the adjustment that is made to the gross national income to account for differences in the cost of goods. So we also talked about sectors of the economy. This is another measure of the standard of living. We talked about the fact that there is a primary, secondary, and tertiary, or third, sector. And you can identify what maybe different members of your family or where they work and in what sector they worked on based on these descriptions. But we said that the primary sector consists of people who extract materials from the earth. This could be mining. If someone works in a coal mine, this could be farming. This could be really anything that has to do with getting materials out of the earth. And so basically that's going to be mining and farming, whether they're mining for coal or for granite or whatever, that would be what makes up the primary sector. And typically in less developed countries and LDCs, you'll see a whole lot more people working in the primary sector. In the secondary sector, this is manufacturing. So manufacturing is just turning a raw material like cotton into a finished product like cloth. This could also be construction. So you take a raw material like wood and you turn it into a finished product like a house. They do this in factories, construction. This is the secondary This is the secondary sector. And then in MDCs, most of the people work in that third or tertiary sector, and this would be involved with selling goods and providing services. And so this would be, anyone who works in a retail store, anyone who's a lawyer or accountant, a teacher, anyone who sells tires, whatever they're selling. This would be a part of the tertiary sector because it has to do with the sale of goods and services. And typically in MDCs, you have most of the people working in the tertiary sector. So we talked about HDI. This is the Human Development Index. And this is based on 3 factors. We said that this is based on the standard of living. This is based on education, and this is based on health. So standard of living has to do with the living conditions of the people in a country, whether or not they have access to a good place to live, a cost-efficient place to live, a safe place to live. Their education, this is based on how many years of schooling people generally have in a country. And then in terms of health, they look at the type of health care that is available in a certain country. The IHDI makes allowance for the inequality within a country. We talked about the fact that in more developed countries, there's usually less inequality. There's no country where they have equality across the board. Like we have slight inequalities in the southeast and then the northeast and then the western part of the country. But in general, in MDCs, there's not a whole lot of inequality within the country. All right. The GII, this is the Gender Inequality Index, and this looks at the differences between males and females on the basis of empowerment, employment, and reproductive health. So empowerment would be looking at like how many women hold positions of power, like how many women are seated in the legislature of a country. Employment would look at the ratio of women who are employed versus those who stay at home, and then compared with men. And then reproductive health looks at the motherhood mortality rate, how many women are dying in childbirth, and also the adolescent pregnancy rate. So how many teenagers are having children. And so typically in MDCs, you have more women in the legislatures, more women who work outside the home, and women have less children, and there's a lower rate of adolescent pregnancy. Whereas in less developed countries, you don't have a whole lot of women in legislature positions. You don't have a lot of a high level of women working outside the home, and then the motherhood mortality rate and the rate of teen pregnancy is, both of those are high. Okay, and then Rostow's model of development. So we talked about Rostow. He has 5 levels of development that a country will go through when they are developing. The first one is traditional society, and this would be mostly agricultural. Even though there are countries in the world where most people are farmers, there's currently no country in traditional society the way Rostow categorizes it. This would be like agriculture as practiced in like 5000 BC. So there's currently no country that falls into this category. But in this category, it is almost entirely agricultural. Everyone or almost everyone is a farmer. And then the second category is preconditions for takeoff. This is where you have a group of innovators who decide that it's time to make a change. And they, sit around their boardroom table and come up with a plan for initiating change to further develop their country. The third level of Rostow's model of development is takeoff. And this is when a country experiences rapid development in just a few industries. And so like we said in the Middle East, there were several countries who became rich almost overnight based on the oil industry. And so that would be like an example of takeoff. The fourth level after takeoff is the drive to maturity. And then the wealth that is gained from the growth of those few industries diffuses into the growth of other industries. So rather than just having a couple of industries that are doing well, you have several that are doing well. And then the last stage of Rostow's model of development, which would be where the most developed countries lie on the scale, is the age of mass consumption. And this is the shift to large scale industry, where you have not only several industries, but they are manufacturing goods in mass, and they're providing all sorts of services. And in this stage, people have more wealth, and so they are able to buy more goods and services, and this is very much a consumer society. A consumer is just a person who purchases goods and services. Usually, MDCs who are in this level also have fully developed welfare systems and lots of trade networks, the expansion of trade networks with other countries. Okay, we will stop there for today, and then tomorrow we will finish reviewing chapter 10. And then after that, next week we will move on to chapter 11. So don't forget to write some things down and send me a picture of your notes. I really do miss you guys, and I love you very much.